That was Darren McCullens reporting. Well, there's not been a lot to look forward to lately, but that looks set to change next week with the vaccination programme kicking off and the rather unpleasant Tier 4 lockdown restrictions being eased. Well, joining me now is the Cabinet Secretary for Health, Jeanne Freeman. Good morning to you. Thanks for being on the programme.
Morning.
Let's start with the vaccine. We know the first doses have arrived in Scotland. How many doses is that, and have you identified the first person who will actually get it next week?
Well, the first people who will be vaccinated next week are our vaccinators. So the people who are going to be vaccinating the rest of us will be the ones to be vaccinated first. We will have around about 65,500 doses arriving as part of the first batch approved supply to the UK. So that's our share. And then we expect other deliveries over the course of this month.
How regularly will those supplies arrive? How many people do you estimate per week will be vaccinated?
Well, we can't be clear about that yet because we don't have final dates on subsequent supplies after the 65,500. But our plan is that once we've vaccinated the vaccinators, we then move and vaccinate for the rest of this week and carrying on our health and social care workers. And then from next week, we will be able to go into care homes with our NHS nursing and other clinical staff to vaccinate the older residents in those care homes.
Yeah, I'll come to care homes in just a second, but has the company given you no indication whatsoever as to how regularly there'll be supplies, what sort of level they'll be at?
Well, remember, this is a UK-wide four-nation procurement, so we constantly are in touch with the UK government, with Public Health England, about the frequency of supplies and the exact dates in which we can expect them. And until we have absolute confirmation of those dates, then it makes no sense to give speculative numbers. So once we have confirmation of delivery dates, then very happy that everyone knows that. What we're interested in is getting that regular supply over this month, but also supplies into January, February, March, because we've got a lot of people to vaccinate in that time period.
And in terms of actually getting the vaccine here, there are reports this morning that military planes are to fly the BioNTech vaccine in from Belgium to avoid Brexit delays at the ports. Is that how they'll arrive in Scotland?
Well, that's our understanding, is that the UK government have made these contingency supplies, contingency plans for the supplies, in case Brexit does hold things up at ports. At the moment, they're coming in the normal way, but we certainly expect every step to be taken to ensure that supplies are not hindered by any kind of Brexit deal, including a no-deal Brexit, whatever it is. We need to get these supplies, but we also need to get other medicines into the country. There are many important medicines, not least medicines that we use in ICU and in our acute hospitals that we need to ensure come regularly.
Will they be flown into?
Well, that's the intention, and that's the discussion that we have at UK level. Both my colleague Michael Russell, but I've got another of my four-nation ministerial calls on Monday night. We have them every week at the minute, between myself, Matt Hancock, Vaughan Gethin from Wales and Robin Swan from Northern Ireland. And we go through all the plans that we need to have in place, checking to make sure that everything is going to work. And if it's not going to work, what are we going to do to fix it?
You mentioned care homes there being a priority. How soon before everyone in a care home who wants a jab gets one?
I can't answer that, Gary, because we are supply dependent.
How soon would you like it to be? What sort of capacity do we have? If you have the supplies, how quickly can you do it?
Well, our intention is to get through all of the 9 groups, so that's everybody over 50 by the summer. We intend to get through the health and social care workers, the 80-year-old citizens, the older people in care homes as quickly as we can over this month, January, and into February, dependent on supplies. And then we will work down through the over 70s, the over 60s who have underlying conditions and other over 60s. We just work down through that list of 9 that you'll have seen from the Joint Committee.
Yes. You resolved during the week the issue about people travelling from care homes to places where the jab would be administered.
Yeah.
How was that resolved? Because you talked about the storage issue in terms of the temperature and also about the size that the batches come in. What changed?
So what changed was that we've not got to the ideal position yet, and the ideal position is a much slicker process. But at the moment, if you've got a wholesale license, and some of our health boards have, then you can pack down the large packs of 997 doses, and you can then administer the vaccine, provided those who administer the vaccine are NHS employees. So our NHS nursing and clinical staff then will go into the care homes and vaccinate those older residents who've consented to do that. Ideally, where you want to get to, because it's quicker, is that you have approval to pack down for the whole of the service, and that means that nurses who are employed in care homes by care home providers can vaccinate those older residents. But we're working our way through that with the MHRA. But in the meantime, the most important thing is that we've found a way to begin to vaccinate those older citizens and to take the vaccine to them, because that was the real critical issue.
For families, they're reported in the Sunday Mail today saying that they can't wait for a vaccine. They've sent an open letter to the First Minister highlighting what they're calling a human rights emergency because in many instances they can't visit. They want you to accelerate the rollout of testing. Can you speed that up?
Well, I have sped it up. So this coming week...
2 relatives can visit in England. That's not the case here, is it?
Well, what I've sped up, Gary, is that this week, about 16 care homes will test the lateral flow devices with us and be testing visitors. Between us and those care home providers, we'll be checking if there are any glitches or improvements that need made. And then from a week on Monday, from the 14th, every care home in Scotland will have a lateral flow device, which means that they can test visitors within that 30-minute time period.
But there are questions about their reliability, aren't there?
There are other things that they need to do. They need to make sure that people still wear PPE. We're encouraging and advising visitors to think very carefully about their own social interactions before they go for that visit to minimise the chances that it will be a positive test.
And will families be able... Will families be able to interact with their loved one? There's 300 residents dying a week of non-COVID related illnesses. Families say use PPE, open up the homes as they do in France and Ireland. I mean, can you guarantee that families will be able to hug their relatives?
So we've already issued advice saying that those kind of visits should be encouraged and supported, and some of our care homes are doing that. What is the case, though, as you know, our care home sector is delivered by local authorities in a small way, primarily by private sector providers. So I need to do everything I can, which I am doing, to encourage private sector providers to have confidence to follow the guidance that I issued some weeks ago that positively encouraged long visits, visits that involve touch, visits that allowed, for example, family members to be with their relatives over meal periods. All of that, we've provided PPE where care homes might not have been able to access that for themselves. We've provided serious wraparound clinical guidance and support from local teams. And now I'm rolling out visiting through the lateral flow devices.
But when it comes to testing, the weekly testing of care home staff, there are reports of samples taking up to 10 days to process. Why are we still struggling to get this right?
So, you'll know this has been a problem with the UK Lighthouse Laboratory.
Well, they say that's categorically untrue. They're quoted in the Sunday Times saying this is a cynical attempt by the Scottish Government to cover up their own failure to deliver on their promise to expand care home testing in Scotland's NHS.
Well, that's not true, because care home testing for staff, when it was initiated, was done through the Lighthouse Lab. And the Lighthouse Lab works very hard, has very good turnaround times, except in what are called satellite testing and home testing. So for some weeks now, I have been transferring care home testing from the UK Lighthouse Lab to the NHS labs to improve turnaround times, where our turnaround times are much better. And as we have increased our NHS lab capacity, we're able to do that more and more. So by the end of this month, all care home testing will be through NHS labs.
Let me ask you about Christmas. Yesterday there was a letter from the chief medical officers across the UK saying the social mixing which occurs around Christmas may well add additional pressure, put additional pressure on hospitals and general practice in the new year. If that is the case, then there are questions about why you're actually doing this, aren't there?
Well, we've been clear from the outset, the First Minister has been clear from the outset that relaxing the restrictions for people around those 5 days at the Christmas period carries a risk that transmission increases. And that's why we've said we recognise it is important, particularly around Christmas time, that where people are not on their own if loved ones want to visit or they want to visit loved ones. It's a very, very particular time of year for many people.
But you're running adverts on television. You're running
that,
adverts on television at the moment saying restrictions will be relaxed, but don't do it. That's a mixed message, isn't it?
No, it's not a mixed message at all. Restrictions are being relaxed.
But you don't want people to. You don't want people to relax them themselves, do you?
The key, Gary, here is to let me finish my answer. The restrictions will be relaxed, as I said, in order to particularly help people who live alone and allow families to be together. However, what we are saying and have said very clearly to people, if you don't need to do that, if you can go through Christmas without that, please, that's what to do. Because inevitably, as soon as you relax restrictions over Christmas or at any other time, you run the risk of greater human contact, and that is the primary source of transmission. So this is not news to anybody. Everyone across Scotland for months has become well acquainted with how this virus transmits itself. All the more reason then for all of us to minimise our contact with others and particularly to follow all the guidance about 2 metres distance, face coverings, washing hands and so on. However, you do have to balance that with the quality of life, as you and I have just discussed about care home residents. That's constant balance that we're trying to manage.
On the issue of lifting restrictions, we're due to get announcements next week. Will all areas that are currently in level 4 see the rules relaxed?
Well, we will announce that on Tuesday. The First Minister will make her statement. Cabinet will discuss and reach a final decision on Tuesday morning. And right now, as is always the case in advance of these reviews, a great deal of work is going on, analysing the data, talking to colleagues in local authorities, taking senior clinical advice, all of which is designed to help us reach a judgment about what is the right thing to do, and we'll announce that on Tuesday.
But it could be the case that some of the areas that are currently in level 4 will remain so after the end of next week.
Well, all options are on the table at this point, Gary, as you would expect them to be. That doesn't mean people shouldn't read from that any decision one way or the other. The work goes on over the weekend so that we have the most up-to-date data, the most up-to-date clinical advice. Then we take a decision as a cabinet on Tuesday, and the First Minister makes that announcement on Tuesday.
Could some areas be in level 4 at Christmas?
We're going to keep going round this circle, Gary.
No, but it's important that people know this, isn't it? Because you're talking about relaxing, giving a sense of normality, but it could be the case that some areas are still in level 4 at Christmas.
It is important that people know this, but what's also important to people, I think, is that we take the right amount of time to reach those views and take that judgment. And I've just described the process.
Okay.
That's a really important process so that we get it as right as we can. That's important. That's a big responsibility. And it's important that we get that right for people across Scotland. So we'll do that work over this weekend. And we'll make the decision on Tuesday.
Jeanne Freeman, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.